Joined now by Patrick Johnston of the Province and Post Media, as we are typically on Thursday. I went to BC Lions practice yesterday, and I bumped into two of your colleagues.
Oh, amazing. Wow. It happens.
Kuzma and JJ Adams.
Yeah.
Both of them live and in the flesh. And I went, well, I used to be surrounded by Province writers at Canucks games and practices.
Yeah.
I did note that two of them in one spot.
Ben Kuzma at the Lions?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we need extra.
It's a huge game.
Big game.
Calling in Kuz.
Yeah.
I did note that, rare is the day where two of you are in one place now.
It is true.
Mm-hmm.
It is true. I mean, we used to have these occasional moments where you'd show up at the arena and there'd be three of us.
Oh, four even.
We actually had three recently. There was a practice at UBC that out of nowhere Steve Ewan showed up at. But yes, two or three is a rarity. Usually
Patrick,
one.
there were days I went to it was Bosch.
I know.
It was Jameson. It was Eddie. It was Gallagher and Kuz. Like there could be five of you guys in one spot back in the day.
Yeah.
So anyways, enjoyed catching up with the both of them. This is a road trip for the Canucks where, winnable games. We were kicking this around yesterday. Do we have to change the equation on what constitutes a successful Eastern road trip now for these Vancouver Canucks? Like, do they have to do better than 50% of the points?
Especially with the circumstances, with all the fatigue on the host side here on this trip.
Well, yeah, I mean, I saw, Blake, you noted that was it you or Jeff noted the back-to-backs of every opponent, basically. But how do we value these Ottawa Senators? I mean, they go to Toronto, okay, so they have to fly, I guess they fly home after the game, but it is a back-to-back.
All 45 minutes of the flight, right?
Yeah.
No, it is a little bit different than a Western Conference back-to-back.
But, they also, were so sort of, I don't know if the word's impressive, but comprehensive in how they beat the Leafs. That's a team that's coming in feeling really good about themselves. Obviously a bit tired, but feeling really good about themselves. But yeah, that Saturday game in Toronto, the Leafs, I believe, are, if you look up reeling in the dictionary, they're right there. They're a mess. The Habs, I haven't quite figured out what they are, but yeah, this is the kind of at least this season you play these three games, you should take two of these games as a win. That's just how it is. I mean,
that's the big game for the Sens though. Last night, so as much as they might be young, they're also might feeling like dusting their hands off. Okay, job well done. We've accomplished our goal for the week.
They're missing half their blue line.
5-6 on the season and last place in the division too. So, they deserve probably a better lot in life for being 5-6 on the season.
Yeah.
5-6 on the season gets you a lot further in the Pacific, for instance.
Yeah. Well, yes, and that's right. I mean, that at the end of the day, they can score, but they're also giving up a lot of goals. And as Matt mentioned, they're not at full health. So, it is remarkable in the writing. Thomas Chabot is out, and that makes a difference to your team, even if you do have Jacob Chikrin. I mean, that the Senators as constructed are a very interesting team. I don't know if the coach is the right coach for them, but certainly the potential in this lineup is impressive.
So that's
the other thing to listen for tonight is whether that crowd's all over the coach. And then, of course, on Saturday, maybe they'll get Samsonov, which is
maybe a different coach there too.
Get it while the game's good.
Is 5 points the minimum here though, PJ? I mean, have we reached that point where
you said 4?
5 points the minimum?
Yeah.
Oh, please.
Yeah.
Get real.
No, I am real.
No way. That's ridiculous. I mean, you want to get 2 out of 3.
Taken 12 games.
5 points.
Exactly. I love how it's taken 12 games.
Greedy.
For Price to go from a 50% bar to a 80-some% bar.
82-0.
Exactly.
Guys, fans by all three markets would happily light a match to the building with the players inside of it, I think. That's where we're at with these three. That's where these three teams are at.
So let's ask the bigger, broader question, because this was kicked around on Hockey Night, and it is still very early, but are the Canucks Canada's best team, Patrick? Do you think this is sustainable? Did we all miss the fact that the Canadian 7 was garbage again this year, but there was a new king of the garbage, the Vancouver Canucks?
Well, the fields come back to them to a degree, right? I mean, that's part of the story. I think we all thought the Oilers would be better than this. Maybe they are. The Flames, I was always a big skeptical about. I always said that, basically they and the Canucks would kind of be in a, I don't know, dogfighting. It's too early, guys. I can't think of any of the words. It's not dogfight, but they'd be in the mix for that final, for a third or fourth in the Pacific. The Flames, the Jets seem to continue to be the Jets, which is good on some nights, but mostly circling the drain. You kind of scratch your head how Kevin Cheveldayoff is still running the show there. So sure, there was a good chance
with the new revelations in Chicago too, right?
It's
clear he was in that meeting. He knew that they were just going to delay anything on the second player. Alleging sexual assault.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
So so in the equation, you're like, okay, well, they were at least as good as Calgary, at least as good as Winnipeg. Toronto, you assumed that Toronto would be better, but there's a mess there. And like I said, I thought they'd be better than the Senators, and I thought they'd be better than the Habs. So for them to be the top team is a surprise. I would say that from my standpoint, but they're playing the best hockey of any team in Canada. It's not an unreasonable argument, right? Can they keep it up? Given the structure and the staples, as Rick Tocchet likes to say, that I think there's every reason to think that this team, even as we said last week, they basically have to go 500 for the rest of the season, and they're in the mix. And I think they're better than at worst, they are marginally better than a 500 team. I think they were always going to be sort of a 90-point team. Now they're looking at being a 100-point team, and that's to their credit.
If I'd like your take on this, not that Connor Garland or Anthony Beauvillier is going to get you a top 4 right shot defenseman. Of course, they are not. But if the Canucks are moving one of those two wingers, which one do you think they would prefer to move?
I think it probably actually is Beauvillier, partly because I think he's easier to move because his contract is expiring, and his hit is lower. Also because I think Garland is a better player. Beauvillier is fine. He doesn't hurt your team, but he's not a guy you really want to have as a fourth liner. Like, that's just not the kind of player. It's not even the role. It's just the efficiency of your roster. And so whether it's one or the other, right? Like, you'd rather use that $4 whatever-ish million on a defenseman.
Yeah.
And I wrote a little bit about this yesterday. And Beauvillier, like I said, he's fine. He gets on the ice and doesn't hurt you. And he's got 5 points. He's literally has been the streaky scorer. He got 5 points last week.
But is a healthy Vasily Podkolzin at his price any worse?
Well, that's it. Exactly. And then you replace him with Podkolzin, either one of them with Podkolzin. And Podkolzin finds, if all goes well and he's back in the lineup and he is carrying on with the progression that certainly the brass hopes for, having, when I spoke to Jeremy Colton on the phone and then I actually saw Ryan Johnson, that there is they look at this player and say, this is a kid, first of all, who hasn't been able to be the man since he was drafted, spent 2 years basically rotting away on the end of the bench in St. Petersburg. As good as an environment that might be in terms of winning and, the sort of stuff around that is available to rank and all these things, he did play a lot when he was 18, 19. And he certainly, when he did play, was not being looked at to be a high confidence, do your fun stuff kid type player. It was get out there and don't screw up. Then he comes here, has 3 different coaches in the NHL telling him similar stuff, which is, we're not looking for you to be anything. We don't need you to go out and blow our socks off. Just be competent and kind of losing his way in terms of what he does best. And that's what he's getting to do in the AHL. Certainly what he was doing before he was concussed. So yeah, exactly. If he comes in and he refines himself as, in his every shift, he's going to be out there saying, I'm going to try to see if I can do something. No matter how many shifts a game I get, it's going to be this consistently high level.
And of course, the tail of the tape is far better for Podkolzin than both of those players too, right?
Exactly.
So that helps as well.
Yeah. So that's it. So there's a whole slew of reasons why I think the Canucks actually find themselves all now in a very interesting spot in that regard. I mean, at worst, is Anthony Beauvillier a good-looking San Jose Shark? Like, at worst, you can just move him on, and the value that in him right now is his cap space. Like that, the player is the player's not hurting you, but the real value is just creating space to do something else.
Yes.
And it's one of that has been a difficult thing for this team to do. And they have not had a lot of sort of they've not been in this position very often where they've been able to say, okay, we are going to change what we're doing with that space as opposed to what we're doing with that player. And that is something that we don't talk about. We certainly don't think a lot about, and certainly haven't been able to in this city for quite a long time.
We got into this narrative about Edmonton. Like, if I'm Ken Hall, I think you're at the point where you have to peel off a first to get rid of Jack Campbell's contract just because you're in a win now phase. Is there a version of that for the Vancouver Canucks that they know there's $4 million cap hits for OEL coming? Yeah, there's a bit of a bulge for the cap going up as a whole, but you got to pay Roenick, you got to pay Pettersson.
Yeah.
Is there a mini window open that kind of closes a little bit for a couple of years when the OEL cap hit ramps up again? Like, do you have to think of it in those terms of we kind of should maybe pay a little bit of draft equity to get rid of these contracts because we need to win now or tomorrow, like next year. And then we probably have to take a step back for a couple of years.
No, you're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. And that's part of why I say the Beauvillier thing is to understand in slightly different terms. It's that there is something to work. There is potentially or Garland, either one. There is potentially a something that can be shifted around there for exactly that reason, because your dynamic changes starting next year and then especially the 2 years after that.
Yeah.
And you're looking at right now, and then, I mean, you look at how they've set things up and who their prospects coming down the pipe is. You know that you look at, Tom Verlander is a couple seasons away. Jonathan Lekkerimäki, I don't know if he'll be in the NHL, but certainly he's a player that they have high hopes for in the next season or two. Those are two guys that they are going to come in on an ELCs, and they're going to need a lot from those guys to counterbalance.
That's right.
The counterbalance the OEL dead money.
Verlander on an ELC in 3 years' time would be perfect. But he's got to be ready.
Yeah, but they got to be ready, and so that there's a bet there. So that's that's fine. That's kind of your second. That's when your sort of second window opens up. But right now is the time, and with the sort of struggles of the Oilers and I think the other reality is that you look at that Vegas LA game last night, like, holy smokes, LA beating what we all assumed was the best team in the conference. LA is putting their foot down. I mean, if Vegas wins the division, your Vancouver Canucks are playing this very impressive LA Kings team, and who you assume are going to add, whether that's they find another goalie or they add other players. I mean, that LA team is going to be a formidable opponent in the first round. And so you have to start thinking in those terms.
Yeah.
Yes. And that's what I was going to say, because I was thinking about what Blake asked you yesterday. From a own cap situation, I think you could look at it and say, okay, perhaps there's a window here, particularly at this start. You do have to survey the division in the conference. Like, Vegas and Colorado seem
rooted,
very big mountains to climb right now for this team. Not to mention, I realize they're 14 points back now, but I don't necessarily want Connor McDavid in a playoff series, right?
No.
Like, you have to think of it that way. Dallas is a pretty good team. Will a window open up a little more competitively when Vegas ages out? Maybe when Connor McDavid, gets sick of everything and moves on. Who knows?
I think you can make the argument, though, that Vegas, with their age now, can they keep it up for 82 games and be effective in the playoffs, too? Because they are an old team right now as we speak. So
I almost think like Vegas's hot start might be the worst thing to happen to them in the long run. But we should, because we know how difficult it is.
I will just interject. I will interject.
Yeah.
I've been so much a fan of Bruce Cassidy for so long that I just think you can't underrate.
Oh, no one's counting them out. No one's counting them out.
I just be careful what you say about Vegas.
Yeah.
They're going to be really good, no matter sort of
LA's
whether they have their foot on the gas or not.
LA's got such a nice age profile, though, don't they? Like they've got sort of everything slotted well age wise. And Quentin Byfield's a point per game guy this year. Now, like, we're waiting for him. They could be a lot of fun to watch as well.
Be careful what you say about Vegas. I feel like I'm in the movie Casino for a second here. Uh-huh.
I mean, that's a life statement, isn't it?
Yeah. Don't
Yeah.
diss Wayne Newton.
I
This is
always-
not in this town.
Nothing bad ever happens to me in Vegas.
No. Nor anyone else.
Patrick, marvelous stuff. You're a prince. We'll catch up next week.
No worries.
This clip brought to you by Betway. Must be 19 plus to play. Please play responsibly.